Hello, we welcome you all. I want to welcome Native Travel Festival International. Sarah is right here next to me, and her team, who you might not see, those who are behind all the gadgets. I welcome them into this space, and I want in a very special way to welcome the panelists who in different spaces. We have Sarah here, but we also have Giovanna in another space in Spain. We do have Edima. Edima will be calling in from South Africa, and it is an exciting time. Thank you for Sarah and Giovanna and Edima for coming into this space to share with us what you have learned of women's experiences, women's COVID experiences. Many people are actually doing a lot of research, a lot of studies, and I tell you, a lot of that data is going to gather dust before it's even shared with the public. And so I want to commend you for creating spaces to share what you have learned so that you're able to provide this knowledge, which can then be used to better our policies, to better our strategies, to better our resilience for the sector, which we badly need today. COVID has opened our eyes to a lot of things we thought were impossibilities, but they are now possibilities. A lot of challenges we never dreamt about, and now we are stuck with them here. The art sector is one of those that has really been hit. The creative sector, in most of the spaces, it was being declared as the non-essential sector. And so it is important that we get together, we speak with each other, and we share how we can build our resilience in this space. This is a beautiful time of the year where we are thinking about our culture, our identity, and reflecting on what makes us who we are. But it is also a time when celebrating womanhood celebrates womanhood. In Uganda, we've had beautiful experiences. I think my first time to get on a boat cruise, it was with celebrating womanhood. But now, yes, it's the truth. And it was, I know how you took Sarah and your team at Native, how you were ensuring safety on the water. And all the time we went, crossed, did amazing things with people on islands, and returned safely. So I want to commend you. I really take you as a warrior. You do things, you get into spaces that many people do not get into. I know, for example, you've been organizing writing clinics in different regions of the country, again with your team. And so for me, really you stand out as one of the women to celebrate. And now when you bring us this, again, this is what we want. I think I should also take my time to thank the Ministry of Gender for opening their doors to the art and culture sector and enabling us to celebrate with them as a country, because many people in the sector this week and next week are doing different things in celebration of the International Culture Day, which we have called our International Culture Week. And so I thank Ministry of Gender for giving us that space, for trusting us to be partners on this journey. I think, Sarah, what remains, I don't know if you've done writing clinics in Kabale. I think I should take you to my village deep in Kacherere across Lake Bunyonyi, where I hail from.
Oh, you do? I look forward to visiting there.
Yes, so that you also teach those children about film.
My colleague Dilman has trained people in Kabale. There's also another interesting guy called James King, who is doing James. That. So he works with Dilman, but also has workshops, and UCC has gone. And because of the need, we think instead of, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can complement each other. Yes. But we can visit that village. I love it. I would love to go across and interact.
And so I would like to give a shout out to James King, because I know him. I know he's doing amazing work in Kabale.
True. And Dilman.
And Dilman. Thank you for what you're doing.
And thanks to Stitching Dune, because they support Dilman, they support Native. Yeah, we wouldn't do it without their support.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. And so now I think I should take you straight to our panelists and introduce them to you. We'll just really say one or two things because Google came.
True.
Google knows, and so you can go online and get everything that you would like to know about Sarah, about Giovanna, and Edima. But Edima Otukon is co-founder of Ladima Foundation. Ladima Foundation, in partnership with the German Development Corporation, we thank our partners, really. A lot of these things, we can't do them with partners. So we thank the people who are investing into culture and development. And the German Academy, and organized a short film competition for filmmakers on the African continent to explore their COVID experiences. So Edima will share with us the findings of that competition. She will make a short presentation, but she will also share a short video of that experience. We welcome you and we thank you for being in this space. I would like to welcome Giovanna Ribes, who is the co-director of Festival Donna Y Cinema. She is also a filmmaker. I think this is what keeps the culture sector strong, that people are in it for the passion. They are not in it looking for jobs, but they are in it to make it work. And so I welcome you, Giovanna Ribes. They have just concluded a virtual festival. She will share with us the future of festivals during and post-COVID. In Uganda, I think we still cannot hold physical festivals. A lot of artists cancelled the physical festivals. And so it is important that we learn how they did it, how they managed. I think Sarah says it was a great success. And so it's important that we learn from her. And finally, I welcome Sarah, who is right next to me, Kizan Sigaye, the CEO of Celebrating Womanhood Festival. A few months back, she was supported by the Grasha Machel Trust and Awan in Uganda chapter. This is the GMT cohort, GMT partnerships, GMT networks, GMT, the Grasha Machel Trust. They are doing amazing things in Africa, different parts of the continent. And so I want to give a shout out to Mama Grasha Machel and her team in Johannesburg and all the work that they are doing to empower women, to impact on the girl child positively, to pave way for resilience for women in Africa. They're in all sectors. And so Sarah did a documentary on women's COVID experiences in Uganda. She will share what she found out during her interviews as she did the documentary. And she will also tell us a little bit about how filmmakers and artists can stay relevant to their audiences and help stir them forward. How do you even maintain an audience in this season when we seem to be disconnected with our audiences? So I think it's an interesting perspective that you're going to share with us.
Okay.
And I will moderate the session. My name is Hilda Tonjeire. I write, I edit, especially literary and creative nonfiction works. I work with FemRights, Uganda Women Writers Association. In October 2020, FemRights, with the support of the American Embassy, was one of the first associations to hold a virtual literary festival. And I really would like to say it was a landmark.
Wow.
Yes.
It was huge, actually.
It was very big. We had the support of people across the continent, the writers who teamed up with us, and it was really very interesting. We were very scared at first, but things fell into place, and we didn't know what to do, the technical things, but it ended up a success. And so I would like to thank the American Embassy for that support and for enabling us swim the waters and manage. I have just done a research on the impact of COVID on media in Uganda, identifying gender gaps. But that will be shared another day. But that also reminds me, some of the findings that I had remind me of what I am reading, what you are doing with your team. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And so it's really interesting listening to you.
It would be nice to hear some of that.
Yes. Edima, you're very welcome. Do you hear us?
As Edima joins us, I just wanted to also share that I was I was a jury member
of the film.
Selecting, and it was an amazing experience just watching what is happening in other countries. The resilience, as you already said, the innovativeness. But it was also interesting to establish how, even when artists generally were experiencing challenges, women artists also were experiencing something that we actually also saw in our
documentary.
Like when profiling these other stories for women in agribusiness, which we decided to expand in the interest of avoiding to preempt Edima's presentation. I'm a bit reluctant to talk about it, but just like you said, just excited about how entities like Ladima Foundation found it necessary to actually get the artist's experience, because yes, people were affected, but when you do, the artists are in a way the soul of nations and the world, and they capture experiences, they share them, and clearly, while the media played a critical role, there was a need to capture those experiences, which was not happening. And so but also to see that the world generally, but also African women had these same shared experiences and challenges was also very telling. The fact, what also came out clearly is most industries and sectors have no disaster preparedness, especially when it comes to something like that. I think even the artists were trying to sort of like discover themselves to make sense. So when the soul of a nation, when artists, first of all, are prohibited from communicating to the masses, because our spaces, which are usually public spaces, and engagement, which happens to festivals and which also happens to film, cinema houses, theaters,
public readings,
for Femrite.
We can't have public readings.
Yes.
We published a book in December, No Time to Mourn. A book that we want to go to the public, but we have not taken it out to the public, so we are waiting. We are all waiting for when these spaces will open.
Yeah, so how to go there is really a challenge in closing. And I think it was also a time for policymakers and other stakeholders to recognize actually the work of art, because the pressure, the tension, the cases of people like running mad from not interacting, or they all increased. And for me, I think it reinforces how do we prepare. Of course, issues of abusing Mother Earth came up, and issues of awakening us to that reality. But I'm also reluctant to have that as a conversation now, when it's not what we are supposed to be discussing. Is Edima ready to talk to us? Are you aware? Okay. So can we listen to her?
Do you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, thank you so much. Last year, during the COVID lockdown, the Ledema Foundation and DWA, the Deutsche Welle Academy, decided that what we needed to do was to try to see how we could engage women filmmakers across Africa to speak to their particular experience during COVID. And so a short film competition was launched. And we asked women across Africa to share with us, a 2-minute video, whether it's documentary format or fiction or whatever it is, animation. Just share with us what your experience is during this COVID time. And we were overwhelmed by the number of women that responded to our request. I mean, normally you'd find it really hard to get submission, but in less than 3 weeks, we had 200 submissions from women across Africa. Yes. Who, essentially shared what they were going through, the emotion, during COVID and during the lockdown. And so during that time, we spent 3 weeks going through these amazing short films. And what we found was that there was a theme that was sort of like being generated across Africa. You found that in Southern Africa and West Africa, there was a lot of gender-based violence going on. So women who were already vulnerable were unfortunately being locked up with their their spouses, people who were so essentially what we found was that across Southern and West Africa, there was a lot of the themes were around gender-based violence. We found that also access to education was a problem. The socioeconomic disparities made it hard for some young women to go to school. And we also found that some people were losing their jobs and their ability to fund their homes. Healthcare was another really critical issue. And child abuse was another focus. Across board, we found that women, in just telling these stories, that became very therapeutic, for them. We also found that, a lot of women were struggling with mental health issues, from the fact that they had to physically and socially distance themselves from family and close friends. So, there was a lot that we found in holding this competition, but I think the most amazing thing was that these women across Africa trusted Ledema with, their storytelling and their stories of how they were essentially trying to navigate our new reality, which is, you know, the COVID pandemic, the lockdown, and then post-COVID. And we saw a lot of messages of resilience, you know, women who were able to overcome regardless of what was happening. And I think, you know, just the intervention of having this short competition gave people a lot of hope, you know, because other women who watched these videos connected to these stories and were able to, you know, discuss and have discussions amongst themselves. And I mean, like I said earlier, it was really therapeutic, not only for the filmmakers, but women who watched. I remember myself and Lara just going through, you know, these films, and, you know, with literally waters in our, you know, we were very emotional. I'm so happy to say that quite a number of these short films that were selected, you know, the 10 winners have gone on to win in other festivals. And a lot of the women have, you know, garnered quite a lot of exposure. I think it was an amazing competition. There was an amazing response. It was an intentional competition to make sure that women's stories could be heard in this time. Women are already vulnerable, and COVID made us even more vulnerable. Women were going through, you know, allowed for a lot of channels of opportunities, you know. So we found that a lot of the film commissions across Africa were willing to sponsor and fund women, you know, filmmakers. Out of this, not just from our intervention, but just from the fact that LADIMA and quite a number of other organizations had sort of like shone a light on, you know, issues that women were facing. So I think from this, we found that quite a number of opportunities have been made available, you know, to women across Africa. For us in LADIMA, what we managed to do was to ensure inclusion, partnerships, collaboration, and networking from, you know, this films, which are, you know, our pillars. So I think, without talking too much, and, you know, this is what we were able to achieve. I think Lara is also ready now to share the trailer. So she's going to share the screen. Thank you, Lara. Thank you so much, Lara. I think just before I hand over to you, Hilda, I just wanted to also say that, you know, not everything was doom and gloom, you know, during COVID. There were stories that we received that, you know, just made us smile. You know, the fact that now, you know, more women were using the internet to work, and they were using it to get married. They were using it to, you know, interact and to dance and to have fun. So there was just, you know, quite a lot that came out of it. And so for us, we are excited to see, you know, where this will take us. And we're excited to see where this will take us. And then I also believe that we would, you know, draw more attention to more stuff that, you know, women are doing, and we will continue to look for funding and look for, you know, opportunities for women across Africa to tell their stories, because like we always say, African women have stories to tell. Let's watch them. So thank you so much for letting us be a part of this.
Thank you, LADIMA. Thank you for sharing this important information, this important knowledge. Have you shared the short films which were probably selected? Have you had space where you can share them to other audiences?
Yes, we have. I mean, for the first 3 months after the competition, it was available on the Ladima website, on our Facebook page. We have had festivals that have shown them. Our partners, DWA, have also shown them in Germany. We have quite a number of organizations. We shared them also on some streaming platforms that partnered with us. So yes, some of them were even shown in Brazil. So we've had quite a number of premieres for these short films, and they still go on to make. They've been, I believe, 2 of them have just been selected in a festival. There's so many opportunities for the women.
Thank you, Ladima. Yes, I asked that question because I think that this is very crucial. We've been talking about sharing our stories. I'm part of a group of 3 women, and each of us is working with 20 writers from our communities. This is with a project which is with All Change in the UK. And one of the important things we have been talking about is the importance of sharing our stories. And this becomes even more crucial with the COVID situation, where we are locked up in our small spaces. And so the sharing of our stories is very important, because sometimes you feel, no, this is just my story, this is just me, and that works on your mental health. But when you share your story, you actually realize that it's not just about you. You realize many people identify with your story. So yes, that is why I am asking about opportunities to share that. But I also find choosing competition, choosing competitions, film competitions, something very, very innovative. Because you could have decided, okay, I'm going to just do a documentary. I'm not putting down a documentary, which is what Sarah did, but I find that approach very innovative, that then there's a value that gets attached to someone's creative work. So they get into this competition, it's a motivator. I think really I would like to commend you for choosing competition vis-a-vis documentary. I commend you for that. I would also like to ask my friend Sarah, especially about the trailer. Maybe you will have more to, I don't know if you are, but please respond.
No, I just want to first of all comment, like earlier explained, I was privileged to be part of the people who are selecting films that the jury based on to choose the winning films, right? And as such, we were privileged to watch many films. Congratulations, Ladima Foundation, Lara, Edima, Lydia and team, and I think German Academy and German Corporation, because the initiative was great. I also want to share that Native Voices and Celebrating Womanhood Festival in March actually showed those films. So at a time when we didn't have stories to tell, because many filmmakers, remember COVID came at the beginning of the year. We had just finished the festival, and we didn't have actually many films that had been made because of the lockdown. We got stories from Ladima Foundation that were speaking to audience, because like she said, there were stories that made you smile, there are stories of generosity, and it's amazing what you're saying about the competition, why the competition was, for instance, important. We shared when they put out the call, they shared, they have amazing platforms and network, widespread, because I ran a Celebrating Womanhood Festival and I hadn't seen some of the films that went to the competition, but are from Uganda, some of them done by women filmmakers. And for me, like, all the stories were beautiful. It became very difficult. But there was this story that actually reinforced some of the things that I've kept seeing. But it was a story among the shots. But like I told, the stories were so beautiful. Competition was hard, that some of the beautiful stories that for me spoke to Uganda may not have come out among the 10. But for me, it's not even about the technicalities, but what the story said. And one of the stories that really amazed me when we were reading about stories of corruption in Uganda, where the money that was made for food, for people in Uganda, right? Like we saw stories of money lost in the Prime Minister's office, food meant for people, to help people who actually do not have food, right? Yeah. And then I saw this short film of a woman in Machindi who is a chairperson, and for her, she did not have money, right? But what she could do for her community was to cook porridge every evening. And for people, I mean, for me, those were my heroines. When my presentation comes, I'll share such stories. But I found that at Ladima, in the Ladima shots. And imagine celebrating Womanhood Festival came. Of course, we didn't put so much of a call because of the challenges that came. So we were able to identify with Johanna here, the Festival of Dona White Cinema and Ladima Foundation, and other partners who had such stories. And that was a beautiful story for us. And so I want to commend that. I just want to also follow up. So yes, you have put the stories out, and this goes to Ladima. And I know Lara is also online, so she could also respond. But the essence was to share the stories. After sharing the stories and putting them in the platforms, for instance, what we are doing as GMT, and you are ahead of the women in media here, it was to also inform advocacy and policy. I would like to know how, for instance, Ladima Foundation has used, of course, exhibiting these stories and sharing these stories is already huge success and a great intervention. But I'd like to know if there have been other things like informing policy, engaging other people, because what clearly came out was people were surprised, governments, advocacy, and everything. How else are you using these stories aside from exhibition? Is there a report that has been shared with other festivals internationally, with policymakers? Are there artists who, is there a way, for instance, the African Union is looking at culture, of pushing that so that even as they plan for culture and all these other bodies that like the World WCP plan for culture and creative industries can borrow from the women's experience, because there's also a tendency to think that our experiences were the same. Yes, they were, but they were also unique experiences, gender-based. So I'd like to hear if that happened.
Thanks, Sarah. So for us, I mean, initially, having these films made by women, or calling women to make these films, was not really looking at policy advocacy, but obviously the unintentional consequences of having these kind of films out there is that governments are able to see what is really going on. I think hopefully as we go along, because Ladima, even though we do want to change policy, it is not, or we want to create policies that support women, it is not like our core work at this point. But we are engaged with quite a number of the film commissions, and we've seen that just from these stories that have been told, people are reaching out to more women to tell their stories. And I think from just the fact that women weren't afraid to say, look, this is what I'm facing. This is what is going on during this lockdown for me, help me, I think that in itself has helped quite a number of development agencies or not-for-profits, to channel their efforts in the right direction. we will continue to, I mean, our hope and our vision is to continue ensuring that women are able, to speak their truth, narratives, how would I put it? Have their narratives, shared via, the films that they make. So hopefully, as we proceed in this journey, all of us sitting on these platforms, you as Native voices, because I know that you push for a lot of advocacy, being exposed to these kind of films will help you also channel your interventions in the right, direction for policy development and policy implementation, and just to change things. So it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So we all have to be a part of this, Sarah. So I think for me, we've started the conversation. Now we all need to get on board and ensure that this conversation is sustained. And I think just before I stop speaking, I just really want to thank everyone who was involved in this competition. Thank all the amazing African women who sent in their films and trusted us, to do this. And I think one of the things that I'll answer that Sarah said was why, and Hilda asked, was why a competition? Because we also knew in that time, women needed something, they needed a call to action, to be able to do something. And we wanted to, in our small way, say, okay, this is our contribution to your stories, and and we also wanted to show that with a small amount of money, great films can be made. It doesn't have to be huge budgets, that even though I would love to be able to give huge budgets, but it didn't have to be stories made with huge budgets. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Edima. I think that's crucial. And that it's very important to start the conversation and to sustain the conversation, because sometimes, in advocacy, some of the small errors that we make is starting the conversation and we drop it and we jump to something else and we do not follow up to see where our conversations are leading, where the conversations are taking us. So I think that is crucial, that we push the conversation, we get others on board, and we sustain it. We sustain the conversation until we manage to influence policy, because policies are not one day things. They take years sometimes. They take months. So we just have to be resilient and to continue the conversation. I would like to highlight something that Sarah said in response to you about the fact that some of the entries on the jury team, she says she recognized that some of the entries which she found very strong eventually did not make it to the top 10. But that is the beauty of competition, that it's not just about the top winners, but about how much you generate, how many other people you get into, because whether it gets into the top 10 or not, it has been created. A piece of art has been created. And so those films, it's the same as, calls for poetry, calls for short stories, calls for novels, and calls for books. One will not be the winner, the announced winner, but a piece of work will have been created. Yes, so I think I would like to really appreciate people who get into competitions and people who submit.
Interesting you say that, because I remember when you were getting stories across Africa, I think it was again about women. I was one of the people selecting. I got very because it was tough even selecting what to take and what not to take. But the stories came out like you're saying, so those pieces of works already existed. But for me also, given that opportunity, I was able to link with some of those people. I looked out for them, for their stories, and stayed in touch. And one of them is a South African filmmaker. So yeah, so it's a great way for people to see that you've not lost, because you didn't make the first 10, but your works are out there. And for me, probably another call to Ladima, apart from these 10 stories, how do we explore the new technologies now of online, because now inevitably it's a way to engage, to share these other stories. Is there a plan? Because the other 10 winning stories, Ladima put them online and people can view and visit. They've been distributed widely in festivals and everything, as Edima just shared. But how do we also access these other stories that were not winners? Is it possible? Of course, it's not your call. I'm just appealing if it is something you may consider, even just to put on your platform, because all the people who submitted have friends and networks who will follow, and probably there are other festivals and platforms that might pique interest in these stories. I don't know, just thinking loud.
I think that is crucial, and Edima, I'll ask you to think about it as I shift to Giovanna. Before you give us your short presentation, Giovanna, would you like to say something about Edima's presentation and her trailer?
First of all, I hope you hear me well, and I want to thank you, okay? Because I learn a lot by listening to you all, sisters, you know. It is amazing the work that you're doing, all of you. I mean, superb. And just to say that there are some things that you have said that are very interesting, like, for instance, this thing about the idea of a piece of art, that even not selected, at least you have created it. Second thing, this idea of coming together and getting to know each other through sharing films like we have done in Donna Cinema, you know, because, and now you're not just an unknown person, but you're a familiar face, and that's very important too. And the creation also is familiar. And then we realize that there are some issues that are the same around the world. Okay, it doesn't matter if we are in the North Pole or in the South Pole or whatever. With women, the issues are the same, right? And we still are a second citizen. I don't know how to say it, but we are not first class citizen women. I'm sorry. We still are a second class citizen. And as of course, sometimes it is very difficult for me, for instance, to talk about that, because supposedly I live in Europe, so supposedly I have better conditions, and that's true, apparently, right? So yes, we have to be very careful with governments and administrations, you know, so the law has to be pursued, you know, as you were saying, you know, even if you're a lawyer or you are not, you have to read and read again, and then be able to say, excuse me, it's not that I'm asking that, it's written there. Because in a way, they always forget that when you achieve something and it's written, suddenly it is forgotten, you know? So, and then there is a second thing that, and all this has to do with festivals, in fact. I mean, in a way, everything is connected, you know? It doesn't matter. Even if we belong to a foundation or a film festival or this, or if we are lawyers or filmmakers or whatever, everything is connected. And in fact, I'm sorry to tell you, you know, these things, but we have a group of WhatsApp. We belong to, well, I belong to a national film association that is called FIMA. And I also belong to EWA, European Women Association, right? And we have this WhatsApp, right, where we are, of course, connecting and saying, you know, this is the rule of the government, we have to change this, we have to implement, you know, positive things on, you know, subsidies, all that. But during COVID, that was very interesting. I have many different groups of WhatsApp. This group that we are females, filmmakers, script writers, producers, we were talking about conciliation. We were talking about caring. Do you understand? So in a way, in our brain, immediately the discussions about power, the discussions about subsidies, the discussions about salaries were in a way a little bit postponed for the carer, for the caring. Yes, we talked about even volunteers to help people, friends, women friends that had to go to work, you know? And so in a way, this feeling, it's the same. Talking about festivals, and sorry, so I talked a little bit about what Adima said, so I'm just going to the point. Talking about festivals, it is the same, you know? I mean, when there is little money in crisis time, which festivals are going to be erased? Women film festivals, that's for sure. In fact, this year we had less money. In fact, we have a program that is called Programa Atenea for students. And this year they said, we don't have money, so it's impossible, we're not doing it. And then you realize that the other festivals are being done. And we, because we women are so creative, you know, and as they said, we are able to rule the home and things like that. So because we are so creative, then we, of this weakness, we took a strength, and then we start to connect all the platforms, you know, the film platforms, digital platforms, anything. And we achieved to do the film festival. We had more viewers than ever. We had more films than ever. We could be with you, you know, with all the difficulties, but we could be with you. And it's just because women will support each other. So we said, hey, hello, we had this problem, right? What is going to happen? And even very, very talented filmmakers and very well-known filmmakers internationally, they decided to be part of the festival, you know? So that was, what I want to say is that it's like different layers, you know? Society, government, I mean, laws. Well, you understand what I mean, yeah? The written laws and that. And thanks to the goddesses everywhere, right? We have been able to communicate and realize that we have the same issues. And when we are calling, we go, because we have this, you know, the will to do it. But if not, like, you know, like the Simone de Beauvoir will said, in a crisis time, the first thing to be lost are the, you know, the women rights, yeah? So thanks to that we are conscious about that, you know, it's that we can go on and go on. But then, are we going to be able to rest one day? You understand what I mean? Not to be all the time like fighters, ready, 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 any single thing, with kind of 4 things in our brain at the same time, you know, even criticizing ourselves, criticizing, not criticizing, but you understand, being conscious of what we do or we want or what is right or wrong, educating, oh my God, educating the others. That's very hard job, you know. I don't want to educate anymore, you understand? I mean, I want to share, you know, I want to share. I don't want to fight anymore. This is something of everyone. I mean, it's just justice, it's equality, right? So I think that film festivals our film festivals, not only women film festivals, but these kind of festivals, we still have a dream of art, a dream of looking for something that is inspiring and different, you know? But the rest of film festivals, I find that the films that they chose in general are the same ones that you're gonna see in the cinemas distributed by Warner or whatever, Filmax or whatever. So I think that we are losing something, and in a way, our festivals, and I am including, you know, not only women film festivals, but, you know, this kind of other independent film festivals are the only ones to have this this strength to look for new films and new ways of, or new issues, subjects, topics, whatever, right? And being able to discuss in a very open way without restrictions. That's very important too, without restrictions. Now, something good about the COVID thing, apart, you know, putting apart this thing that we had to take care of the others, you know, you know, pretty commas. I also think that it was good in a way, not because it made us think that we are not infinite, but because you were in your house. So you didn't have anything to do. So let's watch a film. You understand what I mean, right? So I know that it's not very nice because you can say, wow, you know, being at home and nothing to do. But in a way, we could take advantage of that and invite you to see films that probably you would have never gone to see. So suddenly you had another target of people watching your films that probably would have never gone because it's a women film festival, right? Or the possibility sharing internationally, because maybe Edema or Hilda or El or Lara would have not been able to come to our festival. But then filming did something that it was good, and is to open the arms to everyone, not big festivals, small festivals, to everyone to be able to be in the platforms. And then we could share the films. And that's fantastic. Tell me the time, because maybe I'm talking too much or whatever. But basically, I think is that. And the only thing that worries me is the post-COVID, not the COVID, but the post-COVID. Because now, I don't know your government, but here in Spain and in Europe has decided to input what they said a recovery, that is money, okay, for cinema, because many films, many shootings had to stop, and there was a nightmare. So there was a recovery. But then, and part of this recovery was meant for women film directors, right? But I don't know how are they going to use it, because suddenly this recovery is not in the subsidies for women filmmakers. Suddenly it's for other things about women. And I'm wondering, what is it, this thing, things about women? Do you understand what I mean? What is this? Films, issues, topics about women. So again, we have to be, with, the glasses and everything, trying to understand, because I don't even understand what this recovery means, really, So trying to understand what new techniques, because this is new techniques and women issues. Excuse me, what? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, because of course, all the governments have suffered a lot, and there was an economical crisis due to COVID and all these things. Suddenly, cinema is important, but not the small cinema, not women's, films directed by women, but again, the majors, because what we need is to kind of to make that people are happier, like in the Romans and the circus. Do you understand? So that's, because of course people don't want to see anything that is suffering and that is horrible in films after the COVID. What they need is love and cartoons and, So I am more worried about the post-COVID than the COVID, and then I don't know what is going to happen. I know that we will go on no matter what, but I don't know what is going to happen after the post-COVID. That's what worries me, but not only in cinema, not only in festivals, but even in employments, and in social terms in general, because we as filmmakers, we cannot be apart from society because we are in the middle of everything. We drink, we live from it, we are the observers and the persons who are, and in this case, all of us, we are committed to something. So I'm worried about many things, and of course, rights and everything. Sorry, okay, I stop here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Giovanna. I think I hear you a lot about some of the successes, like your festival, but also your frustrations about the woman's story, the small cinema, not being part of the important, not being part of the mainstream of what is considered important. And I think that is shared, that's not just in Spain, but shared across. In Uganda, we face that, for example. There was, in the research that we've just done, we were asking about the gender gaps, like how COVID affected women differently from men. And some of the responses from some of the male journalists were invalidating the women's experiences. I think that cuts across. It is in film, it's in media, it's in writing. The woman's story most of the time gets othered, but we appreciate that that gap is narrowing, and I'm sure we have to continue the conversation towards completely covering so that the gap is no longer there. But also, I would like to ask about, you speak about the importance of festivals and how it is very important for us to get together in these festivals, because for some of us, especially the artists, festivals are like our heartbeat. And so where festivals are not, we completely get affected. It affects our mental health, affects our operations. We need festivals, yeah? So I don't know how, I really love the fact that people have put them online. And as you say, that adds to our other spaces, which I consider a big opportunity in this COVID situation, that we are getting people who ordinarily would not be present, but now they are present in our virtual spaces. I think that is an opportunity that I would like to appreciate. And I'll ask Sarah to respond to your presentation, and Edima. I hope Edima is you're still online. Sarah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Johanna, for sharing that. Of course, you're right, and I agree entirely, and I think that's why we have a Celebrating Womanhood Festival, that actually women's stories can only be told from a women's perspective. So the experience you shared, Hilda, about the men not understanding or watering down the experiences of women is kind of given in a sense that it's not right. But the journey, I was reading somewhere and somebody was saying that 100 years from now, we may still not have attained gender equity, despite the achievement. But what are some of the things that lead to that? Some of the things that lead to us actually, according to ACME and Uganda Media Women Association. Even when, and it goes back to the Hollywood gaze and still here. So you see women do provide labor on the farms and whatever, but they don't determine the income and the market because they don't probably own the land, or even when they do because of the culture. But we've seen a lot of women who are working, but to be correct, they need to be seen beside a husband. And I'm not putting down marriage, especially on a family day, but I'm just saying that all those things and issues matter. There's a time we were going to Mbale, and we found a woman riding a bicycle, and for me, I celebrated a woman riding a bicycle, and she was carrying a heavy load. And then there was a male journalist who said, look at that kind of a woman. Which woman rides a bicycle? Putting our cultures down, shameless woman. I looked at the guy and I called his name. I almost said it here. Thank God I have no. I said, you guy, you mean you want your mother to carry a huge sack such as that lady is carrying, because she is a woman and the culture does not permit her to ride a bicycle. So you want her to go carry that heavy luggage. And you know, that's who you have as a journalist. That's who is going to put the story there. Little wonder then that ACME comes out and says that of the stories that come out in the media, even if sometimes they're about women, it's 20% women that are quoted or appear. And even when they're appearing, how are they appearing and about what? They're talking about product placement, they're talking about, they're showing women, I mean, naked and beautiful and pretty. And if it is a business and a woman goes out consciously to do that to get a business, it's a different story. But if it is for a man's pleasure, then there's a way it is going to put a woman in a certain role, in a certain place. And so they're not going to come out with conversations that affect women from a women's perspective. That's why having festivals such as Festival Donna Eye Cinema, Celebrating Womanhood Festival, and many other women festivals, and even radio stations that are programming for women, and even writers such as Female Writers Association are important. It might be seen as discriminating men, but I don't think that's the idea. The idea is to also catch up and put the women voice and women's perspective. How come that women form the majority? That women actually are the ones working and putting labor on the land, but they don't get paid. And those stories are not coming out in the media. It's because the women are not out there telling the stories. And even when they tell the stories, who is the editor? How are they going to perceive and see this? Are they going to be like the other journalists who thinks that a woman who rode a bicycle? So festivals are very important, and it's unfortunate, as Johanna says, that their space is not there. But I think we have to be deliberate about creating our space. And now, what has happened is that the COVID experience has shown us that there's also another way to engage with the audience. I am very happy and excited for Festival Donna Eye Cinema and our experience. It was a learning experience, but we held festivals online. How are you going to explore and tap into the potential that online media presents? What other lessons and experiences have we picked to find the women audiences and go out there and find them? For instance, for us, what we did during Celebrating Womanhood Festival, we realized that access to data is a problem. The fact that people are paying taxes in Uganda to actually go online and access WhatsApp is also a limiting factor. But also the woman that I'm trying to talk to, the market women and other, there are women who are struggling and may not have the time to come and attend an online festival, sometimes festivals. So we hooked up with Mama FM, and thank you Mama FM, because you were awesome. You really supported us and saw us sail through, because we were able to reach many women that we would normally not have reached out to. So for me, it's not so much as asking, but also sharing this experience and wondering how it can be borrowed, tapped, and what other measures, what are the realities there. Of course, community screenings. But how are you going to do community screenings during COVID when that has been limited? I just want to also hear more thoughts about how COVID now encouraged you and informed you to come up with other creative ways to find your audience. For us, we found our audience partnering with a radio station, Mama FM. I'm forever grateful. I look forward to working with them again and again.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes,
would you like? Yes, respond, Giovanna.
Okay, so thank you so much, Sarah, because I think the idea about the radio, it's very good because we could even retransmit a film through radio, because sometimes there are films, that sound exactly like a novel, a radio novel. So that could be one interesting thing, for instance. And I have to say that we also go to villages, okay, because here in Valencia, there are some villages that are very lost up in the mountains. Even if you maybe think that there is coverage enough, and that we could, with platforms, digital platforms, we can reach these villages. We cannot, because they don't have cover for internet. So what we do during summer is that we also go there with our little projector, and we show the women, films directed by women. So, I mean, what I wanted to say that apart from the platforms and all that, we do a work in real, every single summer, we just go around these villages. Okay, that's one thing. But the second thing is that the radio thing is very good. It's a very good idea, and I'm going to think about it. And let's try to put a name to that, like cinemas through radio cinema. You understand what I mean? Let's try. Okay, yeah, that's fantastic idea.
Yeah, fantastic radio cinema. And
I like that.
And of course, here we have something called VJs. Those are the people who actually interpret to the audience films that they don't understand in the language. But over the years, they have grown and become more creative. They do things like describing to you what is happening, the way the people who actually relay football matches will describe to you. So for us, it was a first-time experience, but going forward, we look forward to working with VJs, female VJs, not to isolate male VJs, but we would like to also grow female VJs, because now they look at women differently and describe them differently. So we would like to see how we work with them to audiolize, for lack of a better word, audiolize the films. And yes, I like what you say, radio cinema. So going forward, that's one of the things. But because Edima is...
I think I like that. Radiolize cinema. I think that's the creativity. I would like to Edima, would you like to respond to Giovanna?
Yes, I just wanted to concur with Giovanna, and even to what Sarah had said earlier about the significance of film festivals, and the fact that with COVID, you've now had to create like hybrid events or total online events to sustain film festivals. And I think that is one of the opportunities that exist. I mean, we without being a film festival, the film competition that we held was sort of like a festival, and we saw the fact that we had so many views of our films. And just to respond to what Sarah had asked earlier, how do we now continue to show and to draw attention to those who didn't win? We actually do have like a documentary that is still in the editing phase of the other 20 films that were selected in the initial 30 that went to the jury. And we've also encouraged women who made their films to send them out to film festivals to ensure that they are seen, because really at the end of the day, that is what film festivals are for. Our role is to encourage you to develop them and send them to the right channels so that you continue to grow the value chains and you understand, what, it means to have your film selected. And it is also why one of the things that Ladima is doing, and Sarah is a part of this, we initially had what we had called the Women's Film Festival Network, where we encouraged a lot of women to, share their films with women's film festivals. And we encouraged that selection of films should be, done in a very transparent manner so that all films have an opportunity to be, seen. But now we've realized that, it needs to go beyond just focusing on women's film festivals and focus on all film festivals. So that at the end of the day, when we talk about parity, when we talk about, ensuring that women's films are seen and heard, we are looking at changing the systemic structures that exist, which is ensuring that from the get-go, the selection committees are fair and inclusive. You have representation of both men and women, so that the way a woman would select a film, I mean, just like Sarah said here, there's some films that she felt should have been in the top 10. So we all have different perspectives and different ways on, on how we look at films and how we view films and how we understand, perspectives and narratives. So ensuring that the selection committees at all film festivals, are inclusive and are fair, it's important. Ensuring that juries, ensuring that programming at film festivals encourage women, to send their films there. Because a lot of people said to us they were amazed that we were able to get 200 submissions in 3 weeks, by women in Africa. But I think the reason why that was is because, these women saw Ladima as a safe space, a place that they could send their submissions to, and they would actually get watched. We took the time to say to people, thank you for sending in your films. We will let you know. We respected, the development and the submission of those films. So I think it is very significant that one, film festivals do exist. Two, that they understand that there must be transparency, there must be inclusion. And I really agree and align with you, Giovanna, that with COVID, we realized that you don't necessarily always have to go to a physical location, because that limits, how many people, see a film. Now there are very many opportunities that exist with regards to streaming films and getting women's films out there. And I think we need that. And we need to begin to partner so that we come as one voice, so that at the end of the day, whatever interventions that we're doing, they're intentional and they actually achieve what we hope they will achieve. So, I mean, that's just my submission on, the need for a festival.
Thank you, Edima. I think the key words that I pick from you, Edima, is transparency and inclusion for film festivals to make sense for everybody. Giovanna, your hand is up. Would you like to respond before we go to Sarah's presentation? We are going to do we are going to have Sarah's presentation shortly after you, Edima. Giovanna.
Okay, so, right. I do totally agree, Edima. In fact, CIMA, that is the National Association, has been working with the festival, San Sebastian Film Festival and Seminci, and we have signed a letter of good manners, and including that, like the juries at least, half and half, and that they had films directed by women and that. Sometimes it is very difficult, because even if we want to be very open in that sense, open, I mean that the selection, it's not looked because of a big name or or that. There is something that we also do, that is to force. You understand? I mean, this is a question. We want that everything is clear and that there is no influence and that. But then, in a way, we really want and we force and we reinforce the idea of 50-50. 50-50 in subsidies, 50-50 in film festivals, 50-50 in juries, 50-50. And sometimes people criticize us for being so pushy. But then I always have to, I and everyone, well, we all have to always remember that for a word that I hate, that is normalizar, normalize the whole thing, we have to be pushy. And then we will talk about it 110 years ahead, to see if that was, And then we have to be very careful with film festivals that tell you that they every year choose maybe 75% of women film directors, so they don't need any rule or any reinforcement because they do it in a normal way, normalize in a way. And that's very tricky because they don't assure that the winner is going to be a women director. So maybe you can have 70% of women directors and only 30% of male directors, but it's like the Oscars. Men win. Do you understand? Well, not now, because everyone is saying, you must be very happy. Yeah, after 92 years, yes, I am very happy. After 92 years, only 2 women film directors winning an Oscar. I'm super happy and everything's fine. So we have to have this in mind, that is open and clear, reinforcement, and forcing. And then at the same time, watch when they say to you, we have to try to do it in a normal way, So, thank you.
Thank you. You have to push because you have an agenda, and nobody will meet your agenda if you do not push for it. Yeah. Thank you, Giovanna, for your submission. And due to time, I'm going to be rushing people. And so now I'm going to request Sarah to give us her presentation.
Thank you very much. Yes, Native Voices International. We actually are officially Native Travel Festival, but we registered now and changed the name to Native Voices International because people used to think that it's a travel business. But we were saying native travel because we go to communities and find them in their audience, in their localities. So thank you very much, Hilda, for hosting us. Thank you so much, Johanna and Edima, for joining us. Thank you to the audience there that have joined us. I would just like to say that I'm so grateful to GMT, Greater Machel Trust, and to Awani Uganda. But I'm also grateful to Women in Media, because actually I got introduced to the people of Awani and GMT through Women in Media. And thanks to you, you onboarded me. But through that, they were able to engage us to actually profile women's lived experiences during COVID. Of course, Awani during women in business, agriculture network, Uganda chapter, they were majorly interested in women in agriculture. But being in the media and celebrating Womanhood Festival, we are interested in all stories that how women were affected. So we did profile the agribusiness, but we also profiled other experiences of women. And the video that we wanted to run, for me, captures, even if it's the RDC of Kampala talking about her experience, she well captures actually the entire experience of how COVID took everybody unawares, and I mean everybody. So government then puts individuals and says the RDC is going to be in charge of movement. This is one individual, not an office. So people were stuck, people died, and people switched off because a human being cannot be up 24 hours. So we saw stories of Actually, our trainees made a short film, I think based on a true story of how someone was trying to go to hospital, but the RDC could not give them transport. When you engage with them, you then get another experience of, I had like on a daily basis, thousands of people coming to ask for means. So what GMT was seeking actually when they did this report was to inform policy and advocacy. It's not like Celebrating Womanhood Festival has a priority to inform policy. For us, it's telling women's stories from a women's perspective. So how it inspires women, how it puts out stories there, how it informs policy is also all part of the bonus. But in this case, GMT wanted that. And for me, the story, what I picked was that government, who first of all was not prepared. We don't have disaster preparedness. We usually see disaster preparedness in terms of floods and food and all that. And actually, traditionally, what also COVID served was to take us back to some of the traditional successes we had but abandoned, like food security. Like there was no food security at all. Granaries that we traditionally had.
Every homestead, by standards, every homestead had to have a granary.
And it's interesting that you say that because it's COVID that made people realize what happened to granaries. Because one of the stories we profiled was of people in Tapach in Moroto. And for them, it's mining. And they mine lime, and Tororo Cement sends their huge trucks every day. And she says, we learned that money is not food. That's something that our ancestors know, but that's something that people today may not care about. Why? Because for them, for instance, in Tapach, the trucks would take food and they would buy food. Never mind that there's land, huge spaces of land. So now, when COVID went to the climax, the border towns were closed off. So it meant that trucks of Tororo Cement would not go. Do you know people had to walk 50 miles? Because there was also no access to transport. Tapach is mountainous, and we also know the access challenges that Karamoja is facing, although now they are moving forward. But Tapach is not in Moroto, you know? So women had to carry luggage for 50 miles or carry food baskets only to come and get, and probably the food is finished because you had little money to go and do that shopping. And so for them, the lessons that they picked a lesson that they should, going forward, make sure that they grow food. Spare time and grow food even when they are working in the mines, even as they are mining. So for me, it comes back to festivals and women filmmakers. How are we putting those voices out there? The voices that came out of, for us, going away from the traditional mechanisms of food granaries and growing food. What does that say? How do we send the stories out on the respective platforms where we can reach women? And of course, now that for us as Celebrating Womanhood, now that COVID prohibits us from going to communities and having these conversations, who else do we work with? And while I was sharing earlier about the Celebrating Womanhood Festival innovation, not innovation, but we really sort of like tried to go to radio, which was a new measure that can inspire others.
I think really that was a big innovation, how you could have thought about partnering with TVs, but you thought about partnering with radio.
Yes.
So for me, which is a big innovation, that you gave film voice through radio. I think it was major.
Thank you.
And I have a question about that.
Thank you very much. But I think going forward also for stories like this, like the story of Tapach for me, is we shared, but the GMT has to first launch it. They're still working on that. But also to share that story in the respective WhatsApp groups of, for instance, Karamoja and other countries. So what we have done as Celebrating Womanhood Womanhood Festival, but also as Native Voices, is to, first of all, tap into the film clubs we have across the country and send information through them. And we have, like in Karamoja, we have 7 in 7 districts. We have in Rwenzori region about 6. We have in Kigezi region about 2. We have an associate in West Nile. But also looking for other people, other festivals, other cultural entities, and send the message, because festivals may not be it alone, but we need to be relevant to the women and to the other audience, because we cannot communicate to women alone. Part of what kept coming out, for instance, was domestic violence. If you limit yourself to communicating to women, how are you going to also deal with the issues of domestic violence that came out? If you are having this conversation to only women, how are you going to communicate to government, for instance, that you cannot afford to make an individual bear the responsibility of an office? And for us, the lesson we picked and the recommendation we gave is that responsibilities should go to office, because if it was the RDC's office, it would have meant that every day there is someone to talk to. So if they can put on the screen, Gloria Naroga is one of the women we had who walked to labor from Nansana to St. Catherine at Buganda Road. Why? Because she called the RDC. The RDC was not picking. The deputy RDC was not picking. The chairperson was not picking. The police patrol passed her. The DPC, who is police, was not picking. Why? Because one, they were overwhelmed. Farida tells us they were overwhelmed. They had only 4 vehicles in a district that has 5 divisions. So the challenge was also to actually now be able to communicate to people who pick you. But for Naroga, she had friends who would have picked her. But they had to have a pregnant woman in the car, which pregnant woman they were going to pick, or a letter from the RDC. But as Farida, who was the RCC of Kampala at the time, says, later they had now to start sending permissions by WhatsApp. That was an innovation that came out. So how is policy, how is government tapping into technology and the new reality to respond to the challenges we are experiencing? And how do we as women in media, we as festivals and journalists, let me not limit it to women, communicate this, let these voices come out, and the innovations and the adjustments that people can do. So for me, that's how we can stay relevant to women, because they need that. Edima alluded to something that is very, very important, therapy. Because during COVID, what clearly came out was that people needed people to talk to, to hear what is happening, that it's not just them, that they are cared for. That. So how do we, who do festivals now, then go to women? So there's a majority of people now. We have about 15 million people on WhatsApp or on new media and digital platforms. But what about the 25? How are we going to communicate to them? Of course, more than 15 million people are on phone. Of course, we may not be able to reach out, but let us not forget that in Uganda, same as most African countries, a phone is used, or information is shared by a family. Not just on TV. You go to someone who is not on WhatsApp, will tell you what is happening on WhatsApp. How do they tell you that? It's because the person in their home shared. So how do we now as festivals also promote what, for instance, Ladima Foundation did? Shorts. Because online it's short. How do we as festivals, and how do we as women in film start making short films and telling stories within a space of 1 to 3 minutes or 1 to 5 minutes? We have to learn to do that. Yes, we shall stay commercial. Yes, we shall have to continue with the traditional, but if you're telling a story and staying relevant and doing advocacy, then you also have to think through these PSAs, public information, public service information, very short, but speak to the people. And I think that is something that we really need to go forward to. I saw generosity. And one of the people that I celebrate is Erina Nansubuga. She is an entrepreneur who inspired me greatly, because at the time of COVID closing, this is someone who started business with 5 million, which she asked from relatives, right? But then she grew her business that by the time of closing COVID, right, of the closure, she was dealing with 500,000 USD monthly. not monthly. But what does she do? She gets all these women and men, but women in groups and corporate social responsibility. And one of the areas she was working in is Busoga. And you know, in Busoga, what I will also talk about later, the pregnancy and school drops out and women delivering giving birth to many children who they cannot look after. So she just decided that she was also going to empower these women to do business, but she was not going to limit her intervention at that, to talk to them about family planning, about managing the children they will have. But then she went ahead and never put herself in media. She refused to do that. But she gave women food and families food, portion, rice, and I celebrate her, that generosity, which also goes back to the local chairperson of Machindi, who was cooking porridge because that's all she could do. So I saw generosity, I saw people sharing the little that they had. That was amazing. So as you're reading stories of security personnel beating up women who are going to the market, if you're reading stories of women having to stay in the markets because they can't walk, they can't access, but they have to sell, you also find these stories of generosity, and they really uplift you. For me, therapy, as Edima is saying, but also inspiration. How do we put out those stories? It's a challenge, and I'm looking at, we have to become more creative. I would like to hear more innovative ways we can do that. I saw stories of new media and digital and doing marketing online. And agriculture, because you see majority of Ugandans are engaged in agribusiness or agriculture related business, and that's about 70%, right? But the problem is the market. The problem is the market, because the middleman goes to this woman and man who has been working on their farm for a year and tells them, I'll buy your farm of cassava at 200,000. And this person has fees to pay, has debts, and the cassava will get spoiled because there is no value addition. So they say, okay, you take. But I'm not celebrating that the middleman was eliminated, but the middleman needs to do better, not to be very exploitative. This market woman is not going to be exploited, this farmer, with digital marketing. Why? Because they are able to access. They are able to access markets. You understand? So going forward, how do we communicate? I saw people like Penny Nangategize going out to women, in women groups. How do we communicate to women groups and say you can market and sell your product? Penina had already inspired people online by actually, when Rwanda closed, before they fully closed, the women that they were exploited, she said, you can connect online and Facebook and Messenger and sell your things and put them on the bus, and people send you mobile money in Rwanda and you sell. Those things had already started. How do we push them further? How do we now use those experiences and share them with other women elsewhere? For me, that's how we need to stay relevant, but also help steer people forward, because COVID is here, COVID is not going away, but we need to get the better of it. So what next is for us to tell the stories, inspire people, and find ways of taking these stories to the audience. I saw a lady called Supermom. She sold all her chicks online, because what she did is she used WhatsApp. She said now, because when the chicks grow, she's into poetry. When they grow, they become an expense to feed. And all the restaurants and the people who roast chicken, who were her huge customers, were gone. So she told the stories. Again, stories. How do we help women out there tell stories? How are we going to teach them? Because we do folk tales, so we are already storytellers, especially in Africa. But I want to imagine other people are also storytellers. This lady was able to tell a story about her chicks that have grown, but she has no market. And then she devised means. She utilized borders and bicycles, and they started delivering. And do you know what? She created employment for her sister, because she told her, you can actually deep fry, because the sister is a very good chef. So all these stories inspired me, but I also had sad stories of, for instance, a woman who was hawking fish, and they beat her, and the fish was wasted. And then her landlord, never mind that the president said you can't evict people.
Yeah.
You see, the laws only work if the supposed beneficiaries, one, understand them, two, are able to use them, three, are aware about them. And there is infrastructure and systems that can implement and operationalize the laws.
Yeah.
So government did announce that, but there was no infrastructure to operationalize those laws. So a woman was thrown out. She had nowhere to go. So the generosity again. People took in her children, others took in her husband, and as she was walking and trying to look for fish, and the fish was also thrown by the security detail. Again, how do we talk to our security people? Who are the personnel we are putting out there? What kind of training and people skills do they have? Those are lessons for government, but that's what I think GMT, not Native, will push, but also as Native, for us to put out that information on all the respective platforms and share with the different people.
Thank you so much for sharing the different stories that you have taken on. And as I listened to you, the filmmaker woman felt like a superwoman. How have they themselves been affected, and how have they navigated?
What I was hearing from some of the filmmakers that I've interacted with, for a lot of them, I will talk about the ones in Uganda, and I'll talk about people like Eleanor, but also other Nawiso and others. They said it was a time for them to create. They sat down and created. But also filmmakers, I don't want to forget a lady called Lydia, who was so happy that her husband was staying home, and she was staying home, and it was family time. I don't want to forget about women, today is Family Day, who were saying, I'll go back to your question, who were saying, why did government close? When government closed, our children got pregnant. The pregnancy rates in Karamoja everywhere went up. What are we as filmmakers doing to inform that actually the school is not the one who actually looks after your child? It was a time for reflecting and seeing that, okay, my daughter, and during holidays, I actually tried to take holidays with my children. But my daughter, the last born Mutene, said, Mommy, do you know this is the longest time I've spent with you? COVID did that to our children. Yeah. So how do we learn from these experiences and create time as families for our children, but also able to work? Because COVID has demonstrated that we can work from home. So actually, as creatives, I saw a lot of people editing their projects. Yeah. I saw a lot of people trying to create, but they also had resource challenges. We had a filmmaker who died. It was a man, lack of food. But I also celebrate the artists and filmmakers who came out and supported people. Of course, governments tried to put out food, but people really supported each other. So for filmmakers, how are you marketing? Because for me, what I have seen and the conversations we've been having, even the Art Fund did have a conversation about COVID, and the thing was going online. And I saw people like Fun Factory. They've created a huge audience online. I saw people like Ken Mugabe, who has created an audience and has had concerts online. The women filmmakers, how do we now tap into that? Yeah. How do we create skits? How do we tap into the market? I know that your TV, which is I think Palwood Chibanda, but I also know Airtel has also started something like that. They've created a market where you can sell your films online, and it's very interesting. 1,000, a person pays 1,600 of that money goes to the filmmaker. How do we tap into that? How do we tell stories? How do we go online? Because
and that, Sarah, takes me to another question that I'm thinking about: copyright.
Yes.
How do we protect copyright in this era? How are you maneuvering it as the filmmakers?
I think it's also about how do we educate ourselves and educate the other filmmakers to copyright their works, because works that are copyrighted online, once you use it, it will refuse. Once you put music, for instance, that is copyrighted online, it will say you need approval of this copyright of a work, of works that have not been recognized or approved. So going forward, I think we need to educate ourselves and educate women and filmmakers and other people to copyright their works, because actually these things are there. They are available. We just don't know how to utilize them.
So that then becomes a strategy,
Yes,
one of the strategies
that
for
we need
us
to adapt.
That we need to adapt.
And sensitize and educate. But also a lot of people want to be heard and have not understood these platforms as business. So how do we draw to their attention that they're able to make money online?
Thank you.
As we are also learning.
Giovanna, I'm sure you're still listening in. If you have any response, comment to Sarah's contribution.
I think that what Sarah was saying was very, very interesting in many senses, because I mean, Sarah has been talking about so many things, since the day-to-day life to the responses of people. I mean, and I don't want to say anything else because I don't have anything more important to say, that what Sarah was saying. But what really, I mean, how to explain? But I feel that we have the same issues, because sometimes we have this idea. When Sarah was talking about women in the countryside and the work and all that, we have this idea maybe about Europe, but I could perfectly see my village. You understand, where even if you think that women have been liberated, they still follow, even my friends from school, they have this idea. Like the other day, they were saying to me, it's not very nice for a woman like you to have gray hair. Why don't you change color? We have still like all these little things in our daily life, and that's very difficult. Even if we as filmmakers, we tell our stories and we try to change things, we can see that these things still are there. On the other hand, we have a commitment. We as filmmakers, all the community, film festivals, remember, before times when you needed an advice, you tend to ask your grandparents or your parents, right? Then just 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we read a book, and through the book and the story of the book, we had certain ideas. So we as filmmakers, we are influencers now, because when they see our films, especially teenagers and in the educational system, teenagers tend to grab ideas from films and have this input, right? So we have also to bear in mind that we are a model to follow, that the ideas that we are putting on screen, they're also a model, okay? Maybe they agree, maybe they disagree, but so what I wanted to add is how to make it in a way that we can create this thing in our future, even today, friends and family and society, in a way that through our images and our stories, it's not just like a lesson. I don't know if I made myself understood. It's not just a lesson telling this is the right thing and this is the wrong thing. It's something more subtle, that through that, you get to the emotions, you get to their brain. So when they go home, there is something there, that maybe it's disturbing, so they can change their mind. At least they can ask themselves, what is that is bothering me, that I don't find that is quite okay to end it, so, and thus, when we say that something can break the basis of a society, it's something like that, something that disturbs so much that maybe can change. Apart from everything that we do, education and the rules and the government and this and the films and the villages and the radio, cinema that we have just, thought about it, everything that we do. But then as an artist, what can we create that this establishes the mind of people? You know, like one day, I remember there was a film that is, I think it's Animal Crusher, something like that. Oh, I don't remember exactly the name, but it's a woman director. It's about this little girl that is crushing the society and the system because she doesn't fit anywhere, okay? So people, when we're getting out of the film, they couldn't even talk. They didn't know what to think, what was right or wrong. If they said, okay, this girl, it's impossible and nobody could save her, then they thought that it was not very positive. If they thought that maybe the system was not too good, you know, then so, but that's good, because then suddenly you start to think about many other things. And then if you get to a good opinion or a good solution in your brain, at least you have gone through all of the other ones. Maybe at least you have thought about them and maybe you can understand them. And maybe your idea finally is to go through all the stages. And that's another point, you know? So education and this and rules and that and, you know, every single thing. And then the other part, allowed people to think freely in a way, but through something that it's like touching all the things in their brain.
Thank you for that contribution and for even speaking to some of the earlier points. There's Giovanna and probably even you. There's a question from the audience. I hope Guanica, you're still there. He's asking, what measures are we considering for women? What measures are we considering for
the
commercialization of women-produced movies? For re-commercialization of women-produced movies. I think this is on the assumption that they are not as commercialized as the male-made movies.
I think so. I'd like to respond, but I would like to hear from Johanna's experience, what she has to say about it.
I have, in fact, I was answering through the chat, you know, so, but for me, there are like two different things. One is like distributors and programmers are men, okay? So not even that because maybe they don't really are thinking if this is a female director, so I don't want this film. No, but what they see in the screen are more related to them. So they are the ones who choose the films, right? For instance, one film that is called the Isabel Coixet, that it was Be Afraid of the Night, men didn't like it because they said that they couldn't understand why two women were alone in a little house up in the North Pole without just talking. And then I said to them, what happens instead of these two women is Clint Eastwood and Morgan Freeman? And they said, oh, that's different. So they have been watching these cowboy films all their lives. Do you understand? So that's one thing, okay? Programmers, distributors, and men, right? So it's not something to do with directed by women or men, but what is in the screen. And then there is a second thing. When they see that the film is directed by a woman, they say, oh, this is a women's film. Bah, that's it, right? So what do you mean by a women's film? So it happens that maybe it's not a movie, it's not a film about women, but it's a police, it's a thriller, it's whatever, you understand? So we have to change these two things. I don't know if you know these two things. And it's quite complicated, very complicated, okay?
Okay, thank you. I think what I hear is that one of the strong comments that you make, Giovanna, is systems, if you put having clear systems in place, because sometimes what we suffer is you are the filmmaker, you're your producer, you're marketeer, you're doing everything. So I think what you're speaking to is having systems in place, structures in place, so that each task in the chain is well attended to.
I think we also have a video that kind of alludes to that, but I think that one is the one of sex and women being used as sexual items. Why does it speak to that? Yes. It also speaks to why, what she's also alluding to, the structures, yes, but also the roles, right? Yes. Because if you have programmers as male, the distributors are male, they will then naturally look at what it is that they want to watch to be what they distribute, because that's what they will understand that women want to, like the audience wants to consume. And for them, they want business and to make money. That is one of the issues, and I agree with you entirely. And it speaks to us making sure that we have more women managers, we have more women distributors, we have more women programmers. How do we do that is the question. But also, the other thing is to take roles in the various mediums, because if you're watching a film and you think that the only film that will sell is the one when the women are naked, where does that come from? That comes from a background of thinking that women, and you have to go back to the times when Hollywood was unfolding and the women were not so much in the public domain as consumers. So the men who were industrialists and very stressed and wanted to go somewhere where they can have visual pleasure. And so the markets crafted that kind of woman. So the women movies, if Monica is asking, how do we commercialize women movies? Women movies are commercialized already, but objectified. So I think the stories you're talking about are stories done by women, from a women's perspective, but then they can be bought in cinema. And that will have to do with women learning to tell their stories in an interesting manner. And for me, it falls back to what Rehema Nanfuka talked about when we were interviewing her. She said, the woman has cried a lot. Every time you're showing the woman is a victim, but the woman is at the forefront. The woman is leading. The woman is in the market. And there are men. Am I not more aggressive than certain men in the market? Do you understand? How many, Hilda, in terms of when you speak, when you lead, when you take charge, and the women need to start seeing those stories. But there also have to be women out there who are ready to watch those stories. So how do we learn to craft and market stories that are not objectifying women? That is the other challenge, because the women are already doing stories. I have also seen women presenters, and I've written about it. They have a co-presenter who is male, and this male presenter makes a statement that is degrading or undermining a woman, and the fellow woman laughs. So these conversations have to go out there. We need to go to schools, we need to talk to people, we need to make people be women, be gender conscious, because there is no way you say that they will not consume women films when we are the majority. How? So how do we as women also learn to speak to women? Because there's also a tendency for women to be victims. There's also a tendency for women to tell stories that a man will watch. So when we want to commercialize, it means that we need to train and become better filmmakers. We need to become better script writers. We need to find ways of telling stories in a very interesting manner. And I'll also, for instance, refer to the story of Nisha Kalema, Victoria's Wish. And that story talks about a woman that a Ugandan and any woman in the world wants, a man, the man who is caring, the man who loves his woman, the man who nurses his woman. Which woman will not go to watch that? And which men?
Sarah, before you continue, I think there is something you've just mentioned which I find interesting, but which I always want to interrogate.
Yes.
When you say we need to get to a stage of telling interesting stories, aren't you then prescribing which story I should tell?
Well,
because when I am telling my story, I am considering it interesting. Why do I need to change my story? I never hear anyone, let me put it this way. I really do not hear people tell men to change their stories.
No, they do. They do tell them. They do tell men to change their stories if they are not interesting, because film is also business. There are times when we do stories that we want to tell. That's why you see festivals are very important. That's why you see TV stations are very important. But I am responding to a story of Wanika. And the question is talking about commercialization. Yes. So someone who is going to come to a cinema is going to come and watch a story that they either want to learn from, or they want to, just because they want to watch a beautiful story.
Yes,
and you see, beautiful
with you.
Story does not mean telling men from a man's perspective. That's why I was sharing with you Victoria's Wish.
But don't you think,
No, is
Sarah,
it Victoria's Wish? Nisha Kalema's film.
You make a very interesting point when you talk about skills development.
Yes.
When you speak about training.
Yes.
And so for me, whether it's training for men or training for women,
yes,
that should equip me to tell my story.
Yeah, for us, what we are doing.
But not to be told which story I should tell.
No, but no one is telling which story you will tell. But whatever story you're telling, film is also actually tools. It's also technical.
Yes.
So how do you tell an interesting, which graphics? What is the presentation?
I think that
how
should
are
be
you telling your
training.
story? So no, it's training. That's why training is part of it. But you see, even the best of the best filmmakers go and get critics.
Yes.
And give the critics to critique their films. They start internally and they say this. You know, in film there's something called cutting your babies. There's something you think is so beautiful and you don't want to get rid of it, but somebody is going to come and watch and say, you know what, this you know it. It's the same thing as novels.
Yes.
And women, can't you tell a woman to write an interesting story? It is her story. It is still about women. How do you phrase it? How do you make it professionally acceptable to compete in the market? And the women have to do that. And we have to train them, and we have to encourage them, and we have to also tell them that while we need to tell our stories and share our experiences, we also have to compete in the market and tap into that market and make money. And for me, filmmakers like Nisha have shown that I make stories. I even make films. I made Street Fugees. And when I made Street Fugees, it wasn't interesting for the market. Honestly, the market didn't want a slow world film. I don't regret. Right? I wanted to show people in Karamoja. No, I wanted to show people in Karamoja, especially parents and women who send their children to the streets, to stop sending their children to the streets because of what happens. So I used Karamojong street kids to act in that. Maybe I could have made it more interesting, but did I achieve what I wanted? I am telling you, many women in Karamoja realize, you mean this is what happens? A lot of the women who send their children to the streets don't even know that their children are knocked by cars, that they are raped, that they are despised. So for me, I wasn't looking at a commercial story, and I knew how to distribute it. I took it to communities in villages and showed them. I wasn't looking at taking it to Cineplex.
Yes.
But when I am going to go to Cineplex, then how do I position myself to still tell a women's story, but a story that is going to compete in Cineplex?
Yes,
and it's also about the skills that I need to acquire, the team that I will work with, and how will I market it, how will I distribute it, and of course having women distributors and programmers will also be part of the bonus. So I don't know, but so I don't know if we've answered you, Mzee Wanika, but that is part of it. I'd be happy to also talk about objectifying women, but from a perspective of how women are made as to be sex.
But before you proceed, probably, that's a very interesting angle that we would be happy to speak to.
Hello, Johanna, would you like to respond to that?
I do agree with Sarah, what you have said. Okay, because in a way, that's what I was saying, you know, about the distributors and programmers and that. Now, we tend to think that we women, we we produce, and this is not only us. In filmmaking, as Sarah said, it's also business. And what happens is that depending on the kind of productions you are making. So generally what happens is that filmmakers that are more in the author have the same problems as the question of women thing. Now, why women are always in these bases, put in small films, and that's the real issue. I don't know if, do you understand me? I mean, yeah, sure. Marie wants to talk. So what I try to say is that it is very difficult to raise money for a woman of a film of more than 1 million euros here in Europe. Okay, the normal thing is that we are not, in inverted commas, allowed to do that. Okay, so usually big productions are for men, so these films are distributed because they are more commercial, right? Now, but not the author field. The author field is because the majors usually don't distribute it. And even if in France or in Europe, they have agreements of the percentage have to show, this is not real, because usually this percentage is usually eaten by British, French, or German movies, but not the rest of the countries of Europe. So it's very complicated. It's not only, you understand me, it's a woman issue in a way, because the production is not, we cannot make, in inverted commas, very commercial, huge money business films. But the problem with the small films of distribution is equal the same for men and women. And then we talk about subjects. Sorry, Marie, I think Marie wants to say something.
No, just to say that, to answer to the thing that you say, that why women never receive a big budget or something, because it's something with credibility, of course. So if I use all the time the image, okay, I'm a filmmaker, I would like to make a film with a castle, with horses and things and big things, and a princess, of course, will do that in the tower. Probably I never will receive money, but if I present a project with a woman who make bread herself at the corner of my street, I will receive the money to make my film, because it costs nothing. So it's really something with credibility, and okay, and also to become at the other things. I think the whole line of the creative process to make a film is really perverted by something with gender. So, and because, okay, there is also in production and blah, 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 and the money and the distributor, diffusion, and also the film critics. Okay, in Belgium, we have really difficulties with film critics. There is only one woman and all the men are really awful. So it's really, really heavy to have a Belgian film made by a woman and the cinema, because they said, oh yes, but that's, oh yes, okay, this week we have another film, yes, but it's made by a woman. Okay, and then it's finished. Wow, it's really insulting, see, that kind of things, but means it's possible, and we are in, okay, 2021, so just to say this.
Thank you so much, Ellen. You put what I was trying to say, you've put it so well, so clearly, my response and my war with Sarah, your comment is really important, that women do not have to make films more man understandable or more man interesting, but that rather men have to be taught to listen to the voices of women.
And I agree entirely with that.
That is what
you wanted to say.
Yes.
And I agree with that entirely, because for me, saying that they should be interesting doesn't mean that I want only men, because the first market to tap into is the women. That's why initially when I was talking, I said we even need to teach women to appreciate their own stories and have the conversations of gender equity and objectifying. But that said, even when we want the men to listen to women's stories, then let them not say, but they're poor. Oh, they're not bad, well done. The quality is poor and all that. Let's go there with very beautiful, well done films. And that can only be done if we get the necessary skills and we learn the arts and go out there. And also, let's not fear the spaces, because there is a tendency to say, let me take this, men want this. Let men want what we want. Let them, because there are a lot of that, but it's also going to start, it's you see, it's mouths. It's not going to be only the filmmakers who do this. It's the media. Policy has already come on board, but the media, the schools, the children, the families, because when you're teaching your children as young children, tastes, what things are you sharing with them? It's wide. As women filmmakers and people who want the women perspective, we also need to target and to be deliberate about onboarding all those different stakeholders in this agenda.
Thank you, Sarah. Before we end this, I would like you to speak to policy. I feel that most of the time there's a disconnect between the policy user, who is you, who is me, the artist, and the policy formulator or the policy maker, and the policy itself. Yeah? How much do we feel that the policy gets down to us and we understand it, and do we really work with policy, the policy that governs the sector? Do we, in our practice, our daily practice, do we at all think about these policies?
Thank you, Hilda.
Do we have them in mind as we do our creating?
Thank you, Hilda. Interesting that you talk about policy, and I think operationalization and domestication, I think, and utilization. And you see there are research gaps, when it comes to policy, and there are also implementation gaps. And it's the story of Africa. I don't know elsewhere. I would like to hear from Elise and Joanna and other people, but I would tell you that in Uganda, for instance, when UNESCO now globally says now it's the year of culture and whatever and creative, there's a time they were saying culture industries. Then they moved from culture industries, but when they were saying culture industries, everybody was saying culture industries but not understanding culture industries. And then we came to creative and everybody is jumping with the creative industries, even people who actually formulate policy. But do they understand that? For me, one, it is very absurd for people to pass policies they've not understood. Two, pass policies that they've not domesticated. Three, that they will not operationalize. And why they don't operationalize it is that the users are on many occasions not engaged in the process making, in the policy making processes, and yet the law provides for that. But also, what are the intentions and motives of the policymakers? And without politicizing this talk, I'll, for instance, refer to the UCC regulations that they passed and made sure that we are hidden so that we don't see them. But they also invited people who do not have an idea. For instance, when UCC wants to pass certain policies, they will go and say, and I'm not putting down actors, right? But the reality of Uganda is that actually film is unfolding. commercial film as we know it today is unfolding. So a lot of the actors that we have are not necessarily educated on policy. So what do? They invite these people, put them in a room and make them endorse policies, even when the policies are meant to gag them or make them make payments. For instance, how do you tell a filmmaker that to hold a camera, they have to ask for permission? This is creativity, and then they have to pay 100,000. Already in itself, that is limiting people. But some people would say, okay, because they've not understood that. So policies have to start from one, engaging the policymakers, the policy users. They should be engaged. But these policy users, when you engage them, how do you engage them? That again falls back on us.
Yes.
I'm not elevating myself to a level where I understand, but the nature of my work has made me understand some of the things, not fully. And the industry is slowly attracting people who understand those things. How do we utilize them? And then how do we share with the respective users, make them understand the implication of the policies that are being passed. And when they lobby for regulation, how do they understand what regulation means, how they want to be regulated? And regulation is not a problem, but to what end? Why are you regulating? So there is a gap there, a huge gap. And I'm happy, for instance, the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, where the culture department falls, recently was doing a culture fund. And they were looking at possibilities with support from the European Union and UNESCO of creating a culture fund. And I saw that they engaged us.
Really...
I mean, that is fantastic when it happens. And I appreciate that they engaged us, but also when, that's the other thing, when you engage, how many people were engaged? I was there as Sarah, Muzeiwanika was there, but the people who are going to have to use this, how do we engage them widely? Of course, we have to look at the resource challenges and what, but how do we also now start going, utilizing cheaper ways to do that? And online is one of them. How do we interact with the stakeholders? But that also speaks to creating a directory of who the stakeholders are, where to find them, and educating them. Education is going to be a continuous process. However, policy as it is now, when you look at the policy, you see that even the people who made the policy actually need to be educated. So the people who are, it is the truth, and I am thankful that...
They're policy makers.
No, but you see, the policies are, if you go to parliament now, do you see the kind of parliament we have currently? Do you know when they pass? I am not, let us also face it, because for me, I will be frank that the parliament sometimes is also not aware of these things, right? So what does parliament do? And you don't blame them. You don't blame them. They go now back to the mother ministry. And the mother ministry should inform them. So for us, in our case, the mother ministry being Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. But then there is a confusion of where to take us, where UCC now comes in. They're exhibitors, but do not understand where exhibitors come in. And they come and bring policies that they don't understand. And you know that they don't understand when you have a conversation with them. So for me, it's for policymakers to also understand that they need to educate themselves, especially in an area like film, which is unfolding, and all of us are learning, even us, the practitioners, are learning. So how do we learn on the job? How do we face reality and understand that we are learning, and we need to learn and learn continuously? That is going to be otherwise policies will do what happens to most of the policies in Uganda, which is they're shelved. They are passed, they are shelved.
Until the policy has to catch you.
Until the policy has to catch you. That's why they say ignorance of the law
is not defense.
Yeah,
but I think it's upon us in the sector to really inform ourselves, learn more about the policies that govern us.
True.
Because we will get into trouble. But even just so we know how to operate, our limits that we have within which to operate.
Zoe-Wanika, thank you for the kind compliments, and thank you for joining us, as I would like to thank other people.
Maybe this when you talk about the fact that we are, I know Giovanna is probably online waiting to respond to the question I asked, but when you say that we are in Ministry of Gender, as we are supposed to have a desk, we are supposed to have we have a commissioner, and they are doing a great job, but the priorities. So probably this is the time that we really, even with this COVID challenges, this is the time that we look up to our government.
True.
For a culture, a Ministry of Culture.
Yeah, we've been
when you look back, I was doing a small study for a presentation, and one of the things I actually realized is that in the past, when we had the Ministry of Culture, it did not last, but almost all the policies that we have today were started then.
That's true. I agree.
Then, so there's been a gap from that point at which that Ministry of Culture was dissolved to date. The only thing that has come up is the culture policy,
which is also very wanting.
It's
the one in 2000.
Yeah, that's one of
it falls back to what we discussed of making, because UNESCO was pushing for the policies. So was it domesticated? Was it informed by our reality? No, because even the people who are doing it, the time frames that we are given, it's just about time that this government actually starts prioritizing culture. And I agree with you, and I'll tell you that other countries elsewhere understand that culture is the soul. And it's the engine for development, for everything, right? So when you look at, for instance, West African countries who prioritize culture,
who have culture, who have ministries of culture,
but because they prioritize, even funding goes to culture first, because the development partners then understand that these people prioritize culture. What did Uganda, for instance, prioritize? Initially, we prioritized AIDS, the fight of AIDS, and I'm not blaming that, because it was critical, and we set a precedent, so it worked. So I commend that. But, so a lot of funding came to AIDS. Then the other funding that came in was coming to women, right? Which is okay. But you see,
now is that time for funding to come
and
to
I know
culture.
Hilda, you're such a diplomat, so you won't allow me to talk about this. But please permit me to talk about it. You see, politically, what has just happened is that, for instance, the Bobi Wine wave, right? Which everybody shivers when we talk about it. But as artists, we have to talk about it. Bobi Wine, and I don't support him, by the way.
Why?
I like his energy. I mobilize it. I support Mugisha Muntu because I like what Mugisha Muntu does. And this is not a political platform, but I just want to share that when I'm talking about Bobi Wine, I'm not politicizing. I'm just giving a reality. So that's why I gave a disclaimer.
But you're looking at
his potential and what he presents.
How culture can be a wave. So when you look at Bobi Wine and how, for instance, and that's why policy is not working, because Bobi Wine, being a musician, goes to parliament and explains to people the implication of Tojikwatako, using art and using culture. And let me tell you who started that fight. It was Norbert Mao and other people. But they were not able to sell to the majority of people what was at stake the way Bobi Wine culturally and creatively managed to do that. So he onboarded the public. But when he managed, when he managed to onboard the public in this fight, then he became like up there, right? But why do I talk about him? Then the security in this country and people and government went in panic mode because of the wave that was introduced of Bobi. Because initially, who would think of Bobi and a musician? You know, musicians initially used to be very intelligent and artists, but post Amin that stopped because
artists and musicians and writers went to exile. Fast forward quickly back to Bobi Wine. Then people realized that there's something in art. They influence masses, they are creative. Usually we would do messages for other people. Now Bobi was doing it for himself and for Ugandans, and the eyes were on the artists. And now government has come back to start looking at the art sector.
Yes.
And they are actually thinking of promoting and funding
the
arts
sector.
and culture.
Yes.
The problem now is with the artists. As you're saying, the time is now.
Yeah.
For filmmakers, for artists, for culture practitioners,
For
how are
writers.
we going to utilize? I have seen promoters, how are we positioning ourselves?
Yeah.
I have seen promoters go to say, for now, for us, we need this. Give us money because we spend money. This is not a time for your individual interests.
Yes.
This is a time to promote common good, to promote infrastructure. As a promoter, what do you want? You want theaters in the countryside. That's where a majority of our audiences are. Why are you requesting for personal money? Request for infrastructure to be put there. Request for enabling policies and an enabling environment. Now is the time for us as artists and practitioners to actually utilize the potential that wave has presented to position ourselves, to be appreciated, to demand for a ministry, to speak to ministry, not to fight. We are not fighting government. We just want to add our contribution. And why post-independent Africa, and I am a student of democracy and development, why post-independent Africa has got issues of development is we adapt policies that do not speak to us. And then people make policies of the day. And I have seen artists making the mistake politicians make, which is lobby for their individual interests. Yeah. It is time that we lobby for policies, we lobby for a ministry, we lobby for infrastructure, and then inform policy, not as individuals, but as a sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Isn't this such a good note? I really love the fact that you've spoken the truth and spoken a lot of important things that we need now, because we are not going to win as individuals.
Sure.
We cannot win as individuals. We can only win as a collective voice. And when we win, because we've had small wins, but how are we using these small wins? How are we also, becoming opportunists in that way? Yeah.
Tapping into the opportunity.
Yes, tapping into the opportunities to better the sector. Because once the sector is put at a different level, then the individuals will be catered for.
Sure.
I think you've spoken so well.
Thank you.
Giovanna, you're still there, and I think you wanted to say something.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you, because it's it's very reassuring and a pleasure. And it's always a pleasure also to listen to Sarah, always with this, strength and and that. So thanks to all of you. In fact, yes, one voice all together. That's the thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. And now I'm going to ask the technical team to play. It's a 5-minute video or documentary, or
it's more of vox pops.
Okay, so they're going to play it, but before they start, I want to thank the team so much. Edima, who had to step out, she had to go do something on a different platform. Giovanna, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for spending your time with us. Thank you, my iron ladies. Sarah, thank you for even organizing this, you and your team at Native Travel Festival. And thank you, Femrite, for hosting this.
And thank you, Hilda.
Thank you, and we thank our listeners, Muzei Wanika, Els, all the people who kept contributing. We thank you very, very much. And now I usher you to the the video, which we are going to share right now. Thank you.
be honest, it was really overwhelming because the president mandated us to be in charge. Movement, because I personally, Kampala is huge. It's a capital city. It has 5 divisions: Machinde Central Division, it has Kawempe Division, Baga Division, Nakawa Division. All those divisions have people, very many people. I knew that people would get challenges reaching me. So what I did, mostly at night, I could give you a permit online. Then I fill in for you, I sign and stamp, I take a shot, I send it on your phone. Such that when you're moving, you just show security. And good enough, security picked, because I told them we can't get to everyone. You know, my office is on the 2nd floor, but the 1st floor was filled, the parking space was filled. You could not work on the same, these people, and then the ones on the phone. And I felt the pain of the people. So that was the time I felt I had to be there for the people. It was a very bad moment. People were broke. People were dying. There was a man who came to my office with a wife in a coffin. He wanted a permit. Actually, there were numbers of people at the office. He came late, but I worked on him first. Yes, people died in COVID. There was a parent who called me. He had a mentally ill girl around 19. I sent a car, but on arrival, she died. Then we got also other women who died. Pregnant women could not reach the hospital on time because of the overwhelming emergencies, and the number of ambulances was not enough. The government tried as much as possible. Resources were not enough. Actually, UNRWA gave me a vehicle for emergencies too, because you could call KCCA. It was overwhelmed. So we had to devise other means of trying to reach the people. My 2 private vehicles, so I had 4 vehicles at office just to try to help people. Someone could call the RCC. I am due maybe in 2 hours, my water has broken. And then you call the ambulances, you call your cars, they're far away. Trying to pick others, you call KCCA, it is overwhelmed. So by the time you reach a woman, it is too late. I learned a lot in COVID-19. When I talk about it, I break.